Hey, gun people. So it looks like they're charging, the Santa Fe district attorney is charging Baldwin on the rush shooting, also charging the armorer, and I think charging the guy that handed the gun to him, which I can't remember because this case is like 16 months old, I think. I thought they said it was 16 months. I heard somewhere. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but maybe it is. So anyway, I'm going to go over what she's saying kind of behind the scenes a little bit, and then I'm going to go through the article here on some different comments that were made. And I'll just give you, from an investigative standpoint, what's going on, what they're looking at, and probably what's going to happen. All right, so let's take a look at this video.
Prosecutive decision.
Well, along with my special prosecutor, we got the...
So she said along with my special prosecutor, I didn't know that she assigned a special prosecutor. Normally, you have a prosecutor in your office. One of your deputy district attorneys will be handed the case. For some reason, she assigned a special prosecutor. I don't know why she did that. She thought her office might have been compromised, or they couldn't do it fairly, or... I mean, that doesn't happen too much, that a DA's office gets a special prosecutor out of the office, out of the people that she trusts. Remember, a DA gets to pick all their assistants, just like a sheriff gets to pick all his deputies. For some reason, she didn't have confidence, or she thought the case would be... she would be accused of being unfair if she had her deputies do it. So I don't know why that is, but that's just something that comes to mind.
Report from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. We initiated an extensive review of that, and I will say that it was a well investigated case. But we had some follow up that we had to speak with some experts, and once we...
Okay, the part where she said we had to speak with experts, that means this case is going to weigh heavily on the FBI's examination of the gun, because Alec Baldwin kept saying, I never pulled the trigger. Even though in one of his interviews, he shows his hand pulling the trigger, which is going to hurt him. All those interviews are going to hurt him. It's going to help the prosecution. It's going to hurt them because they talked. That's why they need this expert to say, this gun works properly. I tried, I dropped it. I tried to move it. I bumped it. I tried to push it. I tried everything, and I could not get this gun to fire unless I pulled the trigger. Therefore, in my expert opinion, the only way this gun was fired, which resulted in the death of this woman, is someone pulled the trigger and Alex Baldwin was holding the gun. So that's where the expert's going to come in.
Read through everything and researched the case law and the law here in New Mexico. We realized that we believe that there was probable cause to charge Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed with involuntary manslaughter.
Okay, so when she said thought there was probable cause, remember, probable cause is a really low standard. Probable cause is all I need to arrest you. You know, I show up to your house and your wife says, hey, he hit me. Look, there's red marks on my face. I can arrest you. That's probable cause to arrest you. It's a very low standard. In order to put a case in front of a jury, it's a higher standard, because you have to believe that you can convince 12 jurors to vote guilty for what you're charging. So DAs don't normally charge on just probable cause. Cops usually charge on probable cause. Okay, so when she says we felt there was probable cause, that's not what I consider a strong case. She should have said, we reviewed the case. All the evidence fully supports the charges, and I'm absolutely convinced once a jury hears the charges and sees our case, they're going to convict him of the charges we charged. That's the kind of confidence you want to have when you charge a case. You're wasting a lot of money putting up a prosecution. You're putting these people through the government system. You're making them hire attorneys. You're costing people money. You're tying up courts, judges, hearing, jurors. You don't want to do that unless you're pretty damn sure you can win.
And what were some of the key pieces of evidence that you used that factored into that decision?
Well, that there was such a lack of safety and safety standards on that set.
Huge statement. She said the thing that she found was a total. Now that comes into negligence, failure to use due caution. What's the other word I'm looking for? I can't think of it right now. So the law has some different terms. That recklessness, if you're recklessly endangering, or negligent, those are terms that are normally involuntary, meaning you didn't mean to, but somebody still died.
That there were live rounds on set. They were mixed in with regular dummy rounds. Nobody was checking those, or at least they weren't checking them consistently.
Okay, she corrected herself there. When she made a conclusion that nobody was checking those, the defense would object and say, how do you know nobody? My client's going to testify that she checked them. Other people said they checked them. We have other report. So she corrected herself very quickly and said, or they weren't checking them. What did she say? Correctly? What was it?
And what were some of the key pieces of evidence that you used that factored into that decision?
Well, that there was such a lack of safety and safety standards on that set.
Lack of safety and safety standards means nobody was checking it, nobody found it. Sometimes they checked it. Remember, if you want to go to my playlist, I'll add this to the playlist. I went through all this and a bunch of videos on this when this was happening because I knew it would be a long time. So if you're really interested in the case, go watch all the videos because I go through about they had this, some people weren't checking, the guns were left unlocked, they would put them away before lunch and then use them after lunch without rechecking them. It was just a big joke. And the girl that was in charge was too young, too inexperienced, lackadaisical. Her interview was horrible when the cops interviewed her, sitting there with her legs spread, unprofessional, flipping her hair or purple hair, whatever hell the color it was. I mean, it was just so... I go into detail on that, and they're going to use a lot of those same things that I mentioned to show that there was a lack of due regard for safety of everybody on that set because of the lackadaisical style that things were handled when lives could be put in danger. And in fact, someone was killed because of that. Maybe not on purpose. Someone's dead. And I think this is a good charging. I mean, this woman is dead. A mother... A child doesn't have her mother. A husband doesn't have his wife. Parents don't have their daughter because these guys are fucking around in Hollywood, having rounds around, hiring people because of what color or what bathroom they use and being all cool and loose, thinking we're above the law.
That there were live rounds on set. They were mixed in with regular dummy rounds. Nobody was checking those, or at least they weren't checking them consistently.
Nobody were checking those, or at least, let me correct that, they weren't checking them consistently. That's what she'll have to argue. It's very hard to prove in court. Nobody was checking anything because even in the videos and some of the tapes that I did, they were checking them, but it was inconsistent, sloppy. They would check it by just looking at the back instead of actually removing the round. They didn't shake every round. Some made noise, some didn't.
And then they somehow got loaded into a gun, handed off to Alec Baldwin. He didn't check.
So somehow got loaded into the gun is where is going to be a big part of the defense. Who loaded the gun? The prosecution never said who loaded the gun. They throw out these terms as somebody loaded it. Well, if somebody loaded it, how come they aren't charged? Why are they charging my client? My client didn't load it. Notice they're not saying my client loaded it. That's going to be the defense.
He didn't do any of the things that he was supposed to do to make sure that he was safe or that anyone around him was safe. And then he pointed the gun at Halyna Hutchins and he pulled the trigger.
Okay, so that's not going to be really good in front of a jury. He pointed the gun at her and pulled the trigger. If the jury is going to say, yeah, but it was a movie and he was supposed to point the gun and it was with the script. And the argument will be, yeah, but he was supposed to check the gun to make sure it was safe before he did that. He may have done it in the course of this movie, and it may seem reasonable that it was okay for him to point the gun and pull the trigger because he thought it was safe, but he didn't ensure it was safe. He didn't personally check it was safe. And then Alec Baldwin attorney will be, well, he isn't it true he relied on expert? Isn't that why we have experts? Alec Baldwin isn't an expert. He didn't know, so he relied on experts. We rely on experts all the time. When you take your car to a mechanic, you don't know if the brakes are fixed. You don't know that your steering is good. You rely on the mechanics and the experts. And if you have an accident, you're not charged with a crime. That's where the defense is coming from, I can guarantee you.
You talk about the safety on the set. As part of your investigation, was there one thing that was done or one thing that was said that sealed it for you that this should be prosecuted?
So she's going to use the standard terminology that all cops, all lawyers, and all judges in courts use. Totality of circumstances. It's never one fact. It's the combination and the order and the transition of all the facts put together created the perfect storm. And in this case, it wasn't that live rounds were on a set. It wasn't that they weren't checked all the time. Because any one of those things, you could have removed it and this person may not be dead. But when you put all these things in a list and then someone ends up dead, you're going to get gross negligence, recklessness, whatever the term they're using for their state.
Oh, actually, I think it was the totality of the circumstances, that this was a really fast and loose set and that nobody was doing their job. There were
fast and loose set. We're going to hear that term during the trial. Fast and loose.
3 people that if they had done their job that day, this tragedy wouldn't have happened.
Whoa, that is damning. If 3 people would have done their job, this wouldn't happen. That's going to be the key in this case. Now, I heard somewhere one of the producers already got a plea deal. No jail time, probation. They've already pled to something. And what that means, and I tried to find which one pled, but I can't find the article on it. they want that person's testimony. Part of that plea agreement is that she fully cooperates with the prosecution of the other players. She agrees to testify truthfully, make herself available for the trial and any witnesses' appearances. That's the terminology they use when they cut a deal. That producer will be testifying. I guarantee you it was fast and loose. There was no protocol followed. They were firing people and hiring people. They were worried about money. They cut corners. They tried to save hours. They tried to save money. Alex was in charge. He didn't let people do their job. People that tried to do their job were chewed out and stopped from doing their job. I'm predicting all that shit's going to come out, but we'll see.
And that's David Halls, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, and Alec Baldwin. If they had just done their basic duties, we wouldn't be standing here.
Wow, so they charged all three. I wonder if he's the one that cut the deal.
Our viewers understand, so the state officials did a report. It was signed by the chief medical investigator saying that there was no compelling evidence that this was intentional, right?
Right.
So help our viewers understand, if it's an accident, which most people seem to think it is, why?
Watch the idiot look she gives this guy when he says, if it's an accident, why is it a crime? She holds it back pretty good.
Is that a crime?
Because just because it's an accident doesn't mean that it's not criminal. Our involuntary manslaughter statute covers unintentional killings, unintentional homicides.
Okay, so unintentional, people will be like, what do you mean unintentional? Why is it a crime? If I didn't mean to, it shouldn't be a crime if it's an accident. There's some accidents that are unavoidable, okay? You're driving down a road on a highway, the speed limit's 50, you're not seeing anything, and a kid jumps over a concrete well, runs in front of you, and you run him over and kill him. Kid dies. It was an accident. But there wasn't anything for you to foresee that. You weren't able to react. The kids shouldn't have been there. People should not be driving thinking that kids are going to be running out in the middle of the highway. Therefore, you would probably not be charged. Now, if you were drinking and your reactions could have been quicker, even though the situation is the same, you could be charged. If you were texting and when looking up, even if the situation was the same, you could be charged. So it's totality of the circumstances. And we used to use the example when I was teaching in the academy, when you shoot an arrow. If you shoot an arrow, let's say I'm shooting an arrow at a target. I'm on my property and I'm shooting it. I shoot, I miss the target. The arrow leaves my property and hits my neighbor's wire. The wire starts a house on fire and somebody dies. I didn't mean to kill anybody. I didn't mean to light the house on fire. In that case, I would be charged because I didn't take reasonable steps to understand that if I missed, that I was shooting toward a house and somebody died because I didn't take more positive actions to prevent that from happening. In this case, had the armorers done their job, had Alex checked the gun, had these guys done their job, somebody wouldn't be dead. That's where the negligence, gross negligence, recklessness comes in.
The rest of our homicide statutes cover intentional, but unintentional means they didn't mean to do it. They didn't have the intent to kill.
When she says they don't have the intent, there's such things as called specific intent crimes and general intent. Specific intent means I have to prove intent. Murder 1. I have to prove you plan to kill. You got a gun. You lied in wait. You entered the house because you were mad. You went there looking for the person, found him, and shot him. I have to prove you intended to kill him. General intent crimes, which is usually involuntary things that are lower, means I didn't have the intent, but somebody still died. Okay, so that's kind of a little basic charging 101, maybe.
It happened anyway, and it happened because of more than mere negligence, because of
Even mere negligence will get you charged. There's negligent homicide in some states. Mere negligence can get you. She says it's more than mere negligence. I agree. In this case, it wasn't like somebody made a mistake. It was multiple mistakes that were set up because of lackadaisical, fast and loose set, and they weren't following protocol. They weren't following safety procedures, and they didn't really care, and somebody died because of that.
Didn't exercise due caution or circumspection, and that's what happened here.
And what's your response to, there might be people in Baldwin's camp who say that you were overcharging this?
Well, we disagree, and we're going to be taking that in front of a judge and allowing the judge to decide on probable cause.
So again, this kind of shocked me that she's not giving a good, solid, we're charging because we think we can get a conviction. We're charging because we have full intent on taking this from a jury. This could be a big scam. They could take it in front of a judge, and the judge says, I don't believe there's probable cause. Then they throw it out, and then she gets to say, hey, we tried to charge him. The judge did it. And the judge can say, hey, prosecution didn't give me a strong enough case to charge him, so I had to dismiss it. Talk to the prosecution. And that's what government does. They always have someone else in government to blame as the incompetent one, not themselves. I can't believe that. And when she's talking about the judge will hear probable cause, there's a thing called a preliminary hearing. Some people take it to a grand jury. It's basically a hearing before a trial. And at this hearing, either a judge or a grand jury has to tell and decide, yes, we believe a crime occurred and we believe this person was involved or committed this crime. Once the grand jury or the judge agrees to that, now we go to a trial. And so that's what she's talking about we need to do.
We think that there is enough there, more than enough there, to...
See, she corrected herself. We think there's enough. I was like, that's weak. More than enough. That's better. You better have more than enough. If you got to convince 12 dumbass jurors with the defense throwing all this mud and smoke in the air, you better have more than just a pretty good case.
Forward on these charges and possibly to get through the preliminary hearing stage and on to trial.
Possibly to get through the preliminary hearing? Really? Wow. All right, so let's take a look at this article here, because I read some things. So Baldwin's going to be charged 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the shooting. I'm not sure why we got 2 counts here. He fired a gun once. He hit 2 people, but only 1 died. I'm not sure if that's correct. He might be charged with 2 counts, 1 of involuntary manslaughter and maybe 1 assault with a deadly weapon. I would question whether there's 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, because only 1 person died. So that could be a misprint or a misquote. Baldwin was maintained he was not aware of the gun he fired contained live rounds. Of course, that's his defense. I didn't know. And we're not going to be able to prove he knew. But we are going to be able to prove that he should have known. And we are going to be able to prove, had you checked, you would have known. And had you hired a competent armorer, she would have known. And had the producer followed things, he would have known. So I may not be able to prove that you knew there was live round, but I can damn sure prove you should have known had you used good caution. Terrible miscarriage of justice. According to attorney, he vowed to fight the charges. Of course, they're always going to come out for the client. An attorney for Hannah said the jury will find his client not guilty because she committed no crime. Well, she was negligent, and it was her job. Now, her case will probably be a little bit harder than Baldwin because they can't prove that she put the round in there. And because she gave the gun to another person that was supposed to check, she's got a little bit of a buffer of, it's not completely my fault, but she's still liable. Souza was injured. Charges will not be filed against Souza. Why were they going to charge him? Director. Oh, because he was director, he should have had control of the set. But they're not charging him because he's a victim. And if you charge the victim, it's hard to make him out to a victim because you're charging him. So he's not being charged for his negligence. Maybe he's the one that cut the deal. Gunshot wound to the chest, manner of death. No one is above the law. That's true. No one should be above the law. And I think the family did come out and say they supported this, which kind of shocked me. Because remember, the family signed and accepted a plea deal for money between the movie company and Baldwin. They got a lot of money. I'm surprised that civil agreement didn't have in there, and maybe it's illegal to have it in there, that you agreed not to pursue or cooperate with criminal charges, or you don't want criminal charges pursued, or you understand that there's no criminal negligence here, and that's why you're taking this deal. If that all came out in the civil, that would make the case stronger when you put it in front of a jury. But I don't know the facts behind that. Actor doesn't get a free pass. Announced the intent to file involuntary manslaughter. Every person that handles a gun has a duty to make sure he's going to handle the gun, point it at someone and pull the trigger. Now see, here's my problem with this. Cops kill people all the time when they shouldn't. They shoot, they miss, they injure, they kill hostages. And not one cop gets charged. Every once in a while a cop gets charged. I won't say not one. But it's usually because of color. It's not because they're wrong. It's usually because of the color of the victim, and then they want to make a PC statement, and they charge a color of a cop because of the color of the victim. But most cops are not charged when they do exactly what she's saying. Everybody should be held accountable. Double standard. It's bullshit. An actor doesn't get a free pass. Well, cops get a free pass. Government gets a free pass. Government gets a free pass when they chase people at 120 miles an hour and kills a family, runs people over, and causes death, and they get a pass. Oh, but an actor doesn't. Okay, I got it. There was such a lack of safety on the set. Live rounds. Nobody was checking. Accident doesn't mean it's not criminal. Based on the available information, the manner of death best covers unintentional killings. They didn't have the intent to kill, but it happened anyway. And it happened because of more than mere negligence. So the statute, and I didn't read it, maybe it says for involuntary manslaughter, you don't have to prove intent, but there has to be more than mere negligence. And they're going to go with gross negligence because there was 3 people. They knew they were handling guns. They knew they were pointing guns at people. They knew that the risk of someone getting shot was high, and they should have took a lot of precautions. And in fact, there are precautions set up and protocols of checks and having armor and multiple checks, and nobody did their job, and now somebody's dead. So that's the more than mere negligence that they're going to get over. FBI report the weapon could not be fired during the FBI testing and normal function without pulling the trigger. So now Alec Baldwin is going to be saying, I never pulled the trigger. And then how do you explain that the FBI didn't? Now, the FBI isn't that credible. I don't believe anything they say anyway, and they're just as crooked. But in this case, because there's not a political thing, maybe they're telling the truth. But the FBI has no credibility to me, so most law enforcement doesn't nowadays. The report noted the gun eventually malfunctioned. The report also noted the gun eventually malfunctioned during the test after internal point fractured, which caused the gun. Okay, so what happened here, somebody be like, oh, the gun wasn't good. No. They put it through so many tests that some of the internal parts fractured because they were beating it up so hard. And after they beat it up and fractured the parts, which were not fractured when Alec Baldwin had the gun, that caused the malfunction. So that's how that's going to be explained away. FBI lab is one of the best in the world. Oh my God, here we go. The FBI is great. They're wonderful. They're trustworthy. They're the greatest law enforcement. Whatever, freaking idiots. Any jury believes that. They ought to find him not guilty just because. If the whole case is on the FBI, they all ought to walk. I'll go on record right now and say that shit. He pulled the trigger. He also has a duty to make sure the set is safe. So he was supposed to make sure the set was safe. And from our investigation, there had been accidental discharge prior to this. Oh, I forgot about that. There was like 2 or 3 accidental discharges before this, which normally would cause more concern and you would increase your safety standards. They stayed status quo and kept doing the same thing, even though they had prior. All falls into gross negligence, failure to take due safety precautions to prevent the death. Prosecutor discovered there were people complaining about safety. Oh, shit. Gets worse. And I remember all that. Should have been aware of safety issue, and then as the actor of the day, he should have checked the gun. Senior was stunned by the decision to charge. Of course, because Baldwin's a left-wing idiot, and CNN is a left-wing paper, and they just can't believe when one of their people get jammed up. If Baldwin was a Trump supporter, CNN senior legal analyst would totally support the charges and fully stand by the DA for charging. But because it's a left wing, they're stunned. Highest burden, the case will rely heavily on the expert of the prop masters. They have other prop masters that's going to say this girl had no business being in there. Guaranteed. And then her daddy will come in and say, I trained her and she did know. And she was young and she was put under a lot of stress and it wasn't her fault. And the mean men on the set coerced her into not checking. And they intimidated her and she was bullied. That's going to be her defense. Guaranteed. I'm telling you how this is going to play out. You guys can come back later and go, damn, Rick, you were right. Let's see. Clear message about future productions. Okay, so that's the case, and we'll see what happens. Alec, charged. I'll add this to the playlist. Y'all have a good one.